Dr. Arshad Khan.
Jazakallah, Sohail Bhai, for that lovely introduction. And Jazakallah to all of the organizers for your invitation to allow me to speak today. Um, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du fa'uzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So the topic today that I've been assigned for 10 minutes is to present to you the journey that I've taken as a PhD scientist in the hopes that I can rope some of you into this sort of calling, perhaps, or maybe have you decide categorically that it's something you don't want to do, which is also equally important to ascertain early on. So I don't have slides. What I thought to do with personal journey is just to explain to you with some detailed notes that I have prepared for this topic about my own journey. And what's really interesting is that, you know, you're asking me about a journey that is still ongoing. So parts of this are still unknown to me. The other thing that's also very interesting about being on a journey is that you can look back and realize that there were some things that prepared you for the journey before you even took the journey. And you realize that that journey, Allah Ta'ala has blessed you with the ingredients that you needed to create that journey, when at that time you didn't even know that those ingredients were arming you or provisioning you for that travel. So I'm going to be touching upon some of those aspects today. And the first part of my comments and talk today is going to focus on really my own personal journey, then talk a little bit about the challenges on the road to the PhD and the benefits. And I will say at the outset that the challenges are almost too many to count, and they may in fact dissuade you from this journey. But like any journey, you learn along the way, and you get guidance from great mentors, and you also get the prayers of your Khalifa, and you also seek help from Allah Mia. So I think that hopefully the challenges that I present to you without sugarcoating are not ones that thwart you to pursue this. So to begin, the main point, take-home message of my presentation, which I would like all of you to walk away with, is that pursuing a PhD in an academic, perhaps even basic, as opposed to an applied focus, is actually like performing a waqf zindagi. So if you look at our muballighin and you look at our waqf zindagi, you look at the people, the parents who have waqfin and no children, and you look at the commitment and sacrifice that are needed in order to become a waqf zindagi. It is a lifelong commitment, and there's preparations that you take in childhood with the Waqf No program, for example, to train you. And it requires enormous sacrifice. People don't go into Waqf Zindagi for the money. They go in because they're passionate. They have a love for a devotion towards wanting to serve Allah Ta'ala and humanity. And I contend, and I really loved the presentation of Athar Bhai previously, where he talked about service to humanity. And I think that our physician scientists, as well as PhDs, as well as all individuals in Jamaat Ahmadiyya, for example, ought to consider what their profession is as a service and a waqf zindagi. And if you treat it that way, then you start realizing that it requires the same level of commitment and the same level of sacrifice. So I began, I guess, my journey looking back on my childhood, some of the things that actually have served me well. The very first thing I would say that is very important to become a PhD scientist are reading and writing. And for me, I remember being a young boy and a lover of books. My mother would take me to grocery stores when we would have to get food, and I would always go into the toy and book section. And I fell in love with books, small little books on animals or plants or space, or the stars or oceanography. And there was a golden exploring books collection as a young child that I collected. And I revered those books so much that I remember when I went to Pakistan, my mamu, who has a printing press, I beseeched him if he can take these paperback books and make them hardcover for me. And he bound all of these tiny little kids' books. And I had a collection of books that I would constantly be reading. And that ended up serving me in very profound ways. And that's why I'm spending some time on it. Because as I started developing a love for reading, and as I went through elementary school and middle school and high school, I started collecting more and more books. And what I naturally one does when you start to collect anything is you start to classify them. And in that classification, I became very, very obsessed. I started classifying my books by science topics. I started classifying the non-science books separately. And after a while, over the course of years and years of doing this as a hobby, I actually started, without realizing it, beginning to classify knowledge. And in doing that, almost like spending my summers in reading rooms and libraries, in high school and in elementary school in summer reading programs, you tacitly begin to start placing the world's knowledge in categories and in bins. So coming into high school, I had this ongoing classification system in my head without realizing it. And I'll explain why that serves me well now in a moment. But the other thing that happened in high school is I had outstanding teachers in literature and in the arts. And one of them I remember was my AP English teacher. And I developed a love for writing and argument that complemented the training I was receiving at home with my parents in the Jamaat with Majlis Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya and Majlis Atfal al-Ahmadiyya, where you learn about speaking and debating and participating in ijtima. And at the same time, you're writing essays in high school for your AP class. You start to really hone your skills at writing and communication. And I can tell you that the number one ingredient you need to succeed as a scientist is to know how to communicate, is how to read and how to write. If you do these well, there's nothing you can't study as a PhD scientist. In graduate school, I had to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours reading scientific papers and constantly reading and having an endurance to read. So one of the challenges in this modern age with the internet and with cell phones and devices is you have to understand that you have to cultivate an attention span that's longer than a Reddit thread, okay, or some BuzzFeed, news or something that you see in the New York Times. You have to have a larger attention span and a willingness and a patience to read and to write and to communicate. So those of you in high school, I strongly urge you to take your English and literature classes and your Spanish classes or any other language classes very seriously, because they are the essential ingredients to becoming a scientist. Whether you're writing grants, whether you're writing projects, whether you're writing scientific papers, whether you're writing curricula for teaching, anything you do in my day-to-day activities, 90% of what I do is either reading, writing, or speaking. And the research is all centered around that. So these things about reading and writing, I wanted to impress upon you. In my own journey then, as I went through high school and into college, the other thing that started to happen is I started to assess myself as an Ahmadi Muslim. And I was wondering whether or not, as an Ahmadi Muslim, I had strong faith. What was my faith? And my father was very influential here, where he handed me a stack of books. And these books were all about other religions. And he said that, Arshi, you're my son, you're going into college. And my father did this to me when I was going into college. I want you to study Islam for yourself. You were born into this religion, but I want you to see whether it's right for you. And I want you to explore it. So in that vein, I told him that in that niyat, I'm going to minor in religious studies. And he really loved the idea. So what I started to do is, as an undergraduate biology major, going through my classes, I was minoring in religious studies. And it might sound very counterintuitive, but that really helped me decide and cultivate my research. And the reason it is because I started realizing by taking religions of China, Japan, religious studies about the Bible, religious studies about the Talmud, about the Quran, I started realizing how the world craves unification and unity. And I felt Islam at the end of the day was the answer for me. And that fed into the research I was doing, volunteering in labs, classifying the laboratory findings I was doing as a volunteer, classifying the subject matter I was learning as an undergraduate. And what came out of my college experience was that I wanted to seek the unity of Allah Ta'ala. And that's what led me into research. It led me inexorably into wanting to see if I could unify aspects of my history. So in sum, what I would like to say is that these are the essential ingredients. Now, the challenges are many, and I just want to touch upon these for 15, 20 seconds. You have to really work very hard in getting your grades and classes. You have to really cultivate competitiveness among your peers for accolades as you go. But the essential things are reading and writing and seeking out truth wherever you can find it. And I'll be happy to give you more concrete details on a case-by-case basis in the Q&A session. And I'd like to end there. Jazakallah.